They mocked her ID, laughed at her rank, and slammed her against a car. Seconds later, her encrypted phone lit up, with a direct call from the Pentagon. 3 hours before the Pentagon called, Pinewater, Louisiana was silent under the weight of summer heat and old-world suspicion. This was the kind of town where the same families had lived for generations, where unfamiliar faces weren't welcomed. They were scanned, measured, doubted. And General Ava Marston didn't look like anyone Pinewater trusted. She wasn't dressed like a general. No medals, no uniform, no convoy. Just jeans, sneakers, a plain olive windbreaker, and a black cap tugged low over her twists. She wasn't trying to stand out. She was trying to move quietly, under the radar, like she'd done for most of her career. Her mission was sensitive, classified even. She had a secured in-person briefing scheduled at Barksdale Air Force Base in under 2 hours, no stops, no distractions. But just as she passed mile marker 214 on Highway 171, her phone, her secure satellite-embedded DoD-registered military-issue phone, dropped signal. She didn't panic. She didn't even flinch. She scanned the area ahead and spotted an old gas station just off the road. Carter's Stop. The lettering on the sign was faded, one T missing. It looked like the kind of place that hadn't changed since the early 90s. That was fine. She didn't need comfort. She needed a signal. Ava pulled into the lot, parked near the far side of the building, and stepped out. From the front porch, a small group of locals, white men in faded ball caps, arms crossed, boots dirty from yard work, paused mid-story to eye her. One of them spit tobacco to the side and muttered something low. She didn't hear it. Or maybe she did. She was trained to let it slide. She stepped a few feet from the car and raised the phone. It buzzed once, then connected. General Marston, verifying ID, initiating encrypted brief. The voice on the other end responded instantly, launching into a classified update involving aerial movements along the Gulf. Ava listened, lips barely moving, eyes flicking from the tree line to the station window, then back to the pump island. Her stance was relaxed but trained, alert. Inside the store, June McClary narrowed her eyes. She'd owned Carter's Stop for 18 years and didn't like strangers with attitudes, as she often said. She didn't see a decorated general. She didn't see a national security asset. She saw a black woman, alone, holding some kind of weird phone, pacing, focused, suspicious. That was enough. She reached under the counter for the beige landline and dialed. Sheriff's office? Yeah, it's June. Got someone acting real off outside the station. Tall black woman, real twitchy, talking to herself. Definitely on something. Y'all might want to come, quick. She hung up before they asked for more details. 6 minutes later, just outside the sheriff's station, deputies Jake Riddick and Dale Connors got the call over dispatch. They looked at each other and smirked. Pinewater hadn't had a real incident in weeks. They liked situations. They liked attention. And they really liked being in control. Riddick cranked the wheel of the cruiser and stomped the gas. Sirens blared. Back at Carter's Stop, Ava's call was approaching a sensitive segment, something about overlapping air corridors and radar signature concerns. She was focused, taking in every word, filtering what needed follow-up and what could wait. She didn't know she was already being watched. She didn't know 2 deputies were en route, armed and agitated. And she didn't know that her presence, her posture, her very existence in that parking lot had already triggered something Pinewater had buried under Southern charm and flags on porches. Deep, generational fear of black authority. And Ava Marston, without intending to, had just stepped straight into it. The cruiser tore into the lot with a screech of tires and a spray of loose gravel. The sirens cut abruptly, but the red and blue lights kept flashing, painting the front of Carter's Stop in pulses of panic. Ava paused her call mid-sentence, eyes narrowing as two deputies stormed out of the car. Jake Riddick was the first out. Late 20s, buzz-cut, posture full of bravado. He unhooked his holster like he was preparing for a shootout. Dale Connors followed, older and thicker, chest puffed out, sunglasses still on. Neither of them looked calm. Neither of them looked curious. They looked like they had already decided what kind of person she was. Ava pressed one button on the side of her phone and set it gently on the hood of the car. The call still active. The Pentagon officer on the line shouted her name, but she couldn't respond now. She stepped back, hands visible, voice level. "Good morning, officers. Can I help you with something?" Riddick didn't answer. Connors barked, "ID? Now!" Ava moved slowly, reaching into her jacket. "Certainly. I'm General Ava Marston, United States Air Force. I'm on federal orders. You will find my military ID and my travel credentials here." She handed them over, laminated, pristine, with a clearance seal most people never even saw. Riddick looked at it for 2 seconds before tossing it back on the car. "You serious with this? You think you can flash a fake badge and we'll back off?" "That's not fake," Ava said calmly. "You can contact—" "Shut it," Connors snapped. "You don't call the shots here." A small crowd was gathering. A delivery driver paused, phone out, filming quietly from behind a gas pump. 2 teenage boys on bikes circled closer. From inside the store, June McClary stared through the window, satisfied. Ava kept her voice low. "You're making a mistake. I'm in communication with the Department of Defense. This is a secure operation. I suggest you verify with your sheriff before escalating." Connors was already walking toward her. "Hands behind your back." "I'm not resisting," Ava said, standing her ground. "But I am a general in the United States military, and what you're doing right now is unlawful detention." Riddick laughed. "Sure. And I'm the Secretary of Defense." He reached for her arm. Ava didn't flinch, but her jaw tightened. She could hear her secure phone buzzing louder now. The Pentagon officer was shouting through the receiver. "General Marston, are you compromised? Confirm status." But the deputies weren't listening. Riddick yanked her left arm back roughly while Connors twisted the other, snapping on the cuffs with a little too much force. Ava winced, not in pain, but in fury. Behind her, the phone slid off the hood and hit the pavement with a sharp crack, still connected. The crowd murmured. "She's not even fighting," someone whispered. "Didn't she just say she was military?" "Shut up!" Connors barked at no one in particular. Riddick shoved her against the side of the car hard enough to rattle the door frame. "Got her!" he called, like he'd just bagged a trophy. Ava said nothing. Her eyes stared straight ahead, locked on the window of Carter's stop, where her own fractured reflection looked back at her. Stripped of rank, of context, of humanity. Inside the Pentagon, red alerts were blinking. A technician had just geolocated her phone to a gas station parking lot. A secure call had gone dead in the middle of a classified conversation. Lieutenant Commander Bryce Hanley sat bolt upright at the comms terminal. "Sir, we've lost visual, but the call's still live. We're hearing yelling, restraint sounds." Colonel Dana Sharp moved quickly. "Ping her location. Get Barksdale on standby. This is a breach scenario." Meanwhile, back in Pinewater, Ava was seated on the curb, wrists tight behind her. Connors stood over her, smirking. "So, General," he said mockingly, "what kind of top-secret mission brings you to Carter's stop? Hiding launch codes in the gas pump?" She didn't answer. She didn't blink. "You people always think you're untouchable," Riddick muttered. A bystander spoke up. "You sure she ain't who she says she is? That ID looked real." "Mind your business," Connors snapped. From the shadows, phones were recording now. Not just one, several. The footage was raw. Ava restrained, silent, calm. The two deputies, loud, dismissive, borderline mocking. Then Riddick's radio crackled. Unit 2, confirm status of detained subject. Confirmed, Riddick replied. Female, 40S, not cooperating. Another pause. Then came the voice neither of them expected. Dispatch, again, but shaken. Be advised. Subject flagged federal. Repeat, flagged federal. Orders from Defense Command. Release immediately. Secure area. Do not engage further. Connors paled. What the hell does that mean? Ava finally looked up at him. It means you've just violated federal protocol, assaulted a high-ranking officer, and compromised a military operation. Riddick fumbled for the keys. Ma'am, General? She didn't move. Behind them, the deep growl of engines rumbled closer. A convoy of matte black SUVs stormed into the lot, tires shrieking. Doors opened in unison. Armed Air Force security forces poured out in full tactical gear. The crowd scattered. Phones dropped. Silence swept over the station like a wave. Colonel Darren Mosley stepped forward, eyes locked on Ava. General Marston, he said. His voice clipped. Are you injured? She stood slowly. Only my pride. Their careers, however? That might be another story. Riddick fumbled so badly with the handcuff key that Colonel Mosley had to wave over one of his own officers to assist. The clicking of metal unlocking was loud in the silence. When the cuffs dropped to the pavement, Ava didn't flinch. She simply rotated each wrist in slow, deliberate motion, the raw imprint of the metal leaving a faint ring around her skin. Secure her phone, Mosley ordered. One of the tactical officers retrieved it from the ground, still crackling faintly with encrypted static. The deputies stepped back instinctively, like schoolboys realizing they'd pulled a prank on the wrong teacher. Connors tried to speak. Colonel, look, we didn't know who she was. The ID looked fake and... That's not an excuse, Mosley snapped. His voice was controlled, but the kind of control that sat on top of fury. You had her federal credentials in your hand. You had documentation. You chose to ignore it. But she looked... Riddick stopped mid-sentence, swallowing the words that would have ended his career faster. You saw a black woman with a phone call, Mosley finished coldly, and made a decision based not on protocol but on prejudice. And now you're standing in the middle of a federal incident site. Congratulations. The silence cracked as gasps and whispers flooded back in from the crowd. One man slowly lowered his phone and whispered, "Oh, they're screwed." Ava retrieved her phone, surveyed the damage to the screen and tapped twice on the side. The encrypted call had ended. The Pentagon would be calling back any second. She turned to the officers beside Mosley. Activate evidence retrieval protocols. Secure all body cam and civilian footage. This is now a documented federal breach. Yes, ma'am. One of the Air Force agents approached with a trauma kit, but Ava waved him off. I'm fine. Colonel Mosley walked with her to the SUV, his face still taut with fury. They put hands on a 4-star general, in the middle of an active comm session. What the hell is wrong with this state? Ava didn't respond, not yet. She was still watching Connors and Riddick. The transformation in their faces, from smug to scared, was almost theatrical, but she wasn't here for revenge. She was here for accountability. Inside the vehicle, a young female communications officer turned to her. General, Pentagon Command is requesting immediate confirmation. They've got red lights blinking across 3 branches. Ava took the headset and answered calmly. This is General Marston. Situation contained. Compromise channel severed. Request full incident debrief at Barksdale. Civilian law enforcement interaction confirmed. Unlawful. Stand by for further detail. Outside, the station was fully locked down. Military personnel gathered eyewitness accounts. By the time the sun dipped behind the trees, the names Connors and Riddick were already trending on social media. Hashtags bloomed like wildfire. Justice for Barksdale incident. She was a captain too. Pinewater profiling. That night, the footage hit national news. Cable anchors played the same loop. Ava standing still, hands open, calm voice explaining who she was. The deputies shouting, manhandling, forcing her into cuffs. The Pentagon voice calling through the phone, "General Marston, respond." And then, those black SUVs storming in like Judgment Day. Veterans groups condemned the deputies. The governor issued a formal statement of deep regret. But it was too late. The story was bigger than Pinewater. It was now about what authority looks like and who gets believed when they say, "I serve this country." At a press conference the following morning, a CNN reporter asked a question the nation was already whispering. "General Marston, how does it feel to be treated like a criminal in the country you've spent your life defending?" Ava paused for a long moment. Then she answered, "It didn't feel new." By the time the Pentagon uploaded a full incident log to the Secretary of Defense, Ava Marston was already briefing 4 agencies, 2 generals, and 1 White House liaison. The room was quiet. Too quiet. Every person seated at the long, polished table had seen the footage, and none of them were ready for what was coming next. General Marston didn't sit at the table. She stood. Projected behind her, frozen on a 4K screen, was a frame-by-frame replay of her arrest in Pinewater. The image. Her palms open, eyes steady, while 2 deputies yanked her arms backward. The voiceover, the Pentagon comms officer shouting through the secure line, "General Marston, confirm status. Are you under duress?" The room didn't breathe. "You see this frame?" she asked, voice low. "This was the moment I was identified as a threat. Not when I reached for a weapon, not when I raised my voice. Just this. Hands open, standing still, while black. That's all it took." Across the country, the video had already racked up 19 million views. Hashtags exploded across platforms. Wrong gas station. She was a commander. When respect isn't enough. At a hastily convened press conference later that day, Pentagon Press Secretary Martha LaSalle stepped forward and delivered a clear, clipped message. "The United States Armed Forces does not tolerate unlawful obstruction or aggression toward its active duty officers. General Ava Marston had full authority, full clearance, and full credibility. The local law enforcement agents involved will be held accountable. Not tomorrow. Today." But that wasn't the moment everything changed. But came 5 hours later, when Ava made an unexpected appearance at the Louisiana State Capitol. The hearing was supposed to be procedural, an internal review of law enforcement conduct. But when Ava entered the chamber in full dress uniform, heads turned. The crowd murmured. The chairwoman of the Ethics Committee, Senator Ruth Melville, stumbled mid-sentence. "I'd like to speak," Ava said. "You're not on the witness list," the senator replied. "I am now," Ava answered. And no one argued. She stood alone at the microphone, posture perfect, wrist still bruised. Cameras locked in, no notes, just memory. "You want to know what happened in Pinewater?" she began. "I was arrested for the crime of not explaining myself fast enough." The room went still. "I told them who I was. I showed them federal identification. I gave them every courtesy they refused to return. And for my effort, I was mocked, shoved, and handcuffed in full view of a crowd that either laughed or filmed." Senator Melville shifted. "General, with respect, this committee—" "With respect, ma'am," Ava cut in. "I've been debriefed after aerial disasters. I've issued orders during active missile threats. And never, not once, Have I been treated with such unearned suspicion as I was that morning for the simple reason that my uniform was in my trunk instead of on my chest? The gallery clapped. Not polite applause. Raw, eruptive. But Ava wasn't done. Here's the part that keeps me up. What if I hadn't been a general? What if I were a veteran in plain clothes, no phone, no rank, no backup? What if I'd been someone without power? Because if this happens to me, then God help the next person they decide doesn't look right. A voice from the crowd called out, "Say that again!" She did, slowly, word by word. If this happens to me, then God help the next person. The room thundered. Later that evening, Connors and Riddick were both placed on administrative leave. But more revelations kept coming. Local journalists uncovered internal memos from Pinewater PD, documents showing both deputies had received warnings for excessive force and bias-strengered escalation. Those warnings? Ignored, buried. Someone leaked the footage of the station manager, June McClary, calling 911. The recording exposed her voice, trembling not with fear, but glee. "Yeah, better come quick. She's pacing, acting weird. Looks like she's plotting something." Within 48 hours, Ava's legal team filed federal civil rights charges, not just against the officers, but against the department, the dispatcher, and the gas station itself for racial profiling and unlawful obstruction of federal duty. The DOJ responded fast. A task force was formed. Pinewater was placed under federal review. Subpoenas landed like thunder. Meanwhile, back at Barksdale, Ava received an encrypted email from the White House Chief of Staff. The subject line, "We stand with you." General Marston, your restraint under pressure, your command of response, and your courage in exposure is now a case study in leadership. POTUS requests a private meeting next week. He believes your voice should shape the reform we're preparing. But Ava wasn't interested in symbolism. She made another unexpected appearance, this time on CNN's Town Hall Live. Flanked by veterans, educators, and civil rights leaders, she sat in silence while the anchor read a quote from her West Point graduation speech nearly 30 years prior. "To lead, you must serve. To serve, you must first see. And to see clearly, you must remove every lens shaped by fear." The anchor turned to her. "General, did they fear you that morning?" Ava looked directly into the lens. "They didn't fear me. They feared what I represented, a truth they didn't want to believe, that power doesn't always look like them." The clip aired on every major network. Back in Pinewater, the sheriff resigned. The mayor issued a televised apology. And the final blow? A bill was introduced in Congress, the Marston Act, a sweeping law requiring all state and local law enforcement to undergo federally certified training in military identification, implicit bias recognition, and escalation control. Within 3 weeks, it passed the House with bipartisan support. As the law took effect, Ava stood again before cadets. This time, at the U.S. Air Force Academy. "Some of you will rise quickly," she told them. "Some of you will serve quietly. But all of you will one day walk into a room where your presence is doubted before your name is spoken. That's when you remember, power isn't just your rank. It's your clarity, your control, and your refusal to be shaken by ignorance." No one clapped. They rose in silence. Because sometimes, the loudest ovation is the kind that echoes in discipline. 3 days after the world learned her name, Ava Marston stood alone in her quarters at Barksdale. Her dress uniform was hung neatly behind the door. Her medals, too many to count, lay inside a small case on her desk, unopened. The cameras had stopped flashing, the reporters had gone home. But the weight on her chest hadn't moved an inch. The room was quiet, but Ava's thoughts were loud. She stared down at a yellowing envelope she hadn't opened in years. Her mother's handwriting was still faintly visible across the front. For the day, they make you question your worth. She opened it. Inside was a note, written the night Ava graduated from West Point. It read, "They may doubt your name. They may question your place, but no one can take away what you've earned. Walk like the sky answers to you." Ava folded the letter slowly, then slid it into the inside pocket of her jacket. That afternoon she returned to the gas station in Pinewater, not to speak, but to stand. She parked across the street, got out of the vehicle in civilian clothes, and stood silently at the edge of the sidewalk. No uniform, no press, just presence. Across the lot, two teenagers who had once watched her get handcuffed now stood beside her, shoulders squared, arms folded, mimicking her stillness. Word spread. Within 30 minutes, a dozen others came. Veterans, churchgoers, students, people from Shreveport, Monroe, even Baton Rouge. They didn't chant. They didn't shout. They simply stood with her, creating a silent wall of dignity, across from the place where it all began. Then someone in the crowd whispered, "Do you see what she's doing?" Someone else answered, "She's claiming the space they tried to strip her from." Later that night, Ava sat alone again. She opened her laptop and watched a video sent anonymously. It was raw cell phone footage, not of her arrest, but of Connors and Riddick hours later, standing frozen as Air Force officers descended. In the background, you could hear one of the bystanders say, "They had no idea who they touched, but she knew exactly who she was." That line stayed with her. She closed the laptop, stared into the dark, and whispered, "I always did." And then came the message. A direct text from her former cadet, now a second lieutenant stationed in Germany. "Ma'am, they showed us your story during ethics briefing. Half the room cried. I just wanted to say, I see me in you, and now I walk straighter." Ava replied with only 2 words, "Stay ready." That was all, because this wasn't about revenge. It never was. It was about reclaiming a narrative so many tried to silence. And it was about the quiet victories no one filmed. The look in a child's eyes when they learn that generals can have coils, curves, and conviction. The moment a young black woman enters an interview room with the knowledge that she doesn't need to prove herself twice. The instant a cadet, standing at attention, realizes respect isn't earned through compliance, but through clarity. For Ava Marston, this battle was never about the badge. It was about being seen, fully, fiercely, irrevocably, as the leader she always was. And now, finally, the world was watching. Not because she yelled, but because she never lowered her voice. Weeks later, after the headlines faded and the hearings wrapped, something unexpected happened. A letter arrived at General Marston's office. It was handwritten, the ink shaky but determined. No return address, no rank, just a name, Riley Benson, a retired janitor from Jackson, Mississippi. Inside, it read, "Ma'am, I saw you on TV. I never served. I never made it to college, but I've been looked at the way they looked at you my whole life. You didn't flinch, and because of that, I finally stood up for myself last week. First time in 64 years. Ava read it twice. Then she placed it in a small glass frame on her bookshelf. Between a photo of her graduating from West Point and the citation she received for a mission no one could ever publicly talk about. Because sometimes The biggest victories come quietly. And sometimes the most viral moments aren't about views. They're about validation. She didn't need the world to applaud her anymore. She needed it to listen. And they were. School districts across the country began showing her story in leadership curriculum. A university in Illinois created the Marston Fellowship for Women of Color in National Security. And, on the floor of Congress, a young representative, himself a Black Air Force veteran, read Ava's quote into the official record. Respect isn't optional. Dignity isn't earned. These are the defaults of every human being. And then, one Saturday morning, a girl in Houston uploaded a TikTok, just 14 years old, sitting on her bedroom floor in an oversized ROTC shirt. She looked into the camera and said, "They cuffed her, they mocked her, but they couldn't shake her. I don't want to be a princess. I want to be a general." That clip went viral, because when power stands tall in silence, it doesn't just inspire the loud, it awakens the quiet. So now, we ask you, have you ever been underestimated? Have you ever had to shrink just to survive? Then share this story. Because Ava Marston didn't raise her voice to get justice. She stood still. She held her ground. And the world finally had to move around her.